What if the Ark of the Covenant was not merely lost to time but purposefully concealed? Those who comprehended its profound power understood that the Ark could dismantle empires. The Knights Templar were not feared solely for their prowess in battle. They were revered and dreaded because they unearthed something extraordinary beneath Jerusalem, an object, resonating with a force older than any monarchy and more potent than the sharpest sword. The silence emanating from the Vatican was not a product of ignorance. It was a calculated maneuver. Once the true nature of the Ark was grasped, it became evident why entire orders were obliterated to ensure its secrets remained shrouded in darkness. The wind that swept through the desert carried more than mere grains of sand. It conveyed the weight of history intertwined with stone, upheld by men whose silence served as their armor. The Templars did not conquer Jerusalem merely with sword and standard. Beneath the Crusades' facade lay another mission, veiled and uncharted, expressed in whispers not found in any charter or sermon. Their eyes trained in both scripture and secrecy, discerned patterns overlooked by others, not in celestial bodies, but in the very stones beneath the Temple Mount. Here, hushed stirring indicated something more than the capricious breeze, a subtle thrum that persisted, undeterred by the fall of night. This vibration urged them downward into a silence as thick as oil, where light twisted in peculiar manners and the air itself felt more ancient than the heavens. What they discovered was not a traditional treasure, not gold in the way kings sought after. Instead, they unearthed a vessel, humble in form, yet disquieting in its heft. It bore down upon them as if defying the very laws of gravity. This was the Ark, but not the one depicted in paintings and sermons. It lacked the luster one might expect. Instead, it pulsated with life, and beside it lay age-old scrolls, so fragile they seemed to exhale with each movement. These were not mere scriptures. They were records names strung together like beads on a thread, tracing a lineage that stretched both backward into obscurity and forward into ramifications the church could never. The brothers exchanged no words, not even with one another. They instinctively comprehended that what they had found was not to be displayed. This Ark was not a relic of the past. It was a profound declaration. It affirmed continuity, where the Vatican pronounced a rupture, asserting a lineage that had persisted without seeking permission to endure. Thus, the Templars transcended their roles as mere soldiers. They assumed the mantle of guardians not of wealth, but of profound responsibility. In response to this newly perceived shift, the Vatican's gaze upon them morphed from one of patronage to one of trepidation. For what the Templars had encountered was not merely a box. It was the existential query capable of dismantling whole kingdoms. What if divine entitlement resided not with the most vociferous throne, but with the quietest lineage? That night, rest eluded them. They took turns standing sentinel over the chamber, guarding it not from external threats, but from the temptation to vocalize, or expose the monumental truth they now bore. One among them traced his fingers gently along the Ark's lid and murmured a prayer he had long forgotten. Another, overwhelmed by an unexplainable wave of emotion, wept, as if the essence within the vessel recognized something intrinsic to him. The Ark, in its inexplicable manner, seemed to acknowledge them in return. The chamber felt neither frigid nor warm. However, each man experienced a chill as they stepped further into a sacred silence, one that had been preserved by centuries of breathless anticipation. The brothers committed nothing to their journal entries. To write would invite the risk of attracting unwanted scrutiny. The knowledge they had deciphered was too precise for ink and paper. It now lived within them, weighty and overwhelming. By choosing silence, they embraced the enormity of their revelation. Erstani! And as dawn painted the mount with light, they emerged transformed. They had not merely discovered power. They had uncovered a weighty obligation. If one were tasked with safeguarding a truth as substantial as a kingdom, would they carry it in silence? The Templars consciously chose to do so, and we will follow them deeper into the hollow beneath the mount, where the stones begin to speak. The descent did not begin with directives, but with an insatiable curiosity cloaked in the guise of duty. As dusk descended, and the pilgrims vacated the open courtyards above. The Templars moved quietly, their torches swathed in cloth to temper their flames. Beneath the Temple Mount, the stones turned colder and denser, as if time itself had accumulated beneath their feet. They did not traverse a mere tunnel. They wandered through a memory long buried, where the cadence of breath lagged and each footprint seemed to seek consent. The walls bore no inscriptions. Rather, some resonated with signs older than written language. Impressions molded by hands, long forgotten by history. In that stillness, they learned that the earth itself could communicate. A shift in the mortar, the illusion of hollowness behind a concrete seam, a faint sigh beneath a flagstone each. Sound required a patience sharper than any blade.
Ow.
Their goal was not defined by any cartographic map or mythic narrative, but by instinct, a kind of gravitational draw felt in the depths of their chests rather than their feet. Some nights yielded only dust and disappointment. Others, a palpable note that did not belong to stone. They communicated sparingly, leaning upon gestures and the peculiar rhythm that whispered them deeper into the unknown. They cherished the belief that beneath the wreckage of conquest and the remnants of rulers, something vital lays, something untouched, not by chance, but by a reverent desire to preserve it. A hollow that would not reverberate unless one truly listened, not with ears, but with memory. When they finally uncovered a tan, unadorned chamber, devoid of markings or purpose, sealed not to imprison, but to safeguard, they recognized they had not reached an endpoint. They had stepped into a threshold, a place the world was never meant to unveil, but had awaited centuries for hands worthy of its secrets. Silence enveloped the hollow, not as an absence, but as an expectant presence. Their feet disturbed limestone dust that had remained undisturbed for generations. A palpable stillness hung in the air, a breath held in anticipation of a name yet to be spoken. Even the flames of their torches appeared to dim, not from a lack of fuel, but from an innate reluctance to disrupt the sanctity of the moment. They paused, not out of fear, but reverence. These men, who had faced battle and siege countless times, had never encountered a presence like this. One brother knelt and laid his palm against the floor, speaking no words but conveying the conviction that something beneath was attentive to their presence. Another traced a deliberate groove along the wall, recognizing that its linear form was unlikely to have occurred by chance. The hollow proved a language in itself, a message left by those who had sacrificed everything but truth. They began to chart their findings by touch and sound, attuned to the subtle shifts in airflow that signaled a change below the surface. Eventually, they discovered the first marker and emblem concealed beneath. Centuries of soot and silence, and they realized this was not a site meant for discovery, but a place meant to be cherished by those bold enough to ask the right questions in the dark. Upon unsealing the chamber, the Templars anticipated perhaps a relic or an echo of law chiseled in stone. Instead, they were confronted with something far richer than mere legend. The ark did not radiate light, it drew it in. Its wood was dark with age and bore no embellishments. But when they positioned themselves before it, their demeanor shifted, not merely from reverence, but from a deep recognizing understanding. This was not a tool of warfare. It was an inheritance. Adjacent to the ark lay a collection of parchment, sealed and faded, yet preserved. The writings did not convey commands, but chronicled lineages, a testament of names interwoven and begotten. Crafted with a precision too deliberate to dismiss as mere coincidence, the ark was not simply a container for sacred tablets, it was a vessel cradling a regality of truth, encapsulating not only a covenant with the divine, but a bond that echoed the essence of kingship itself. The Templars comprehended then that their mission had transformed. What they had uncovered could not simply be logged away in records, could not be presented to any ruling throne without fundamentally undermining the existing hierarchy that had dispatched them on this crusade. They studied in silence, transcribing what they deemed safe, wrapping the scrolls in linen anointed with oil not to preserve them as items, but to cradle them as living legacies. This ark was not gold, but genealogy. It was not a weapon, but evidence. It was not myth, but a roadmap. Within its stillness lay the silent testimony of a truth that no crown could endure, one that still remembered its last rightful bearer. The brothers took turns maintaining vigil with it, not out of mere obligation, but out of a profound sense of companionship with this precious artifact. Each night, one of them sat nearby in silent prayer, though unspoken words suffused the air. As they lifted the lid, the air within shifted, revealing more than just dust. A series of symbols faintly scorched into the internal walls were arranged in geometric patterns echoing the architecture of the chamber itself. One symbol mirrored an etching found in a cathedral window thousands of miles away, unsettling them to a degree, as it suggested their discovery was not an isolated event, but part of a greater design waiting for completion. The scrolls narrated tales of intermarriages arranged in exile, of children born under assumed identities and baptized with false names, all weaving back to an origin associated with the very construction of the first temple. The Ark was not merely a testament to ancient laws, it was evidence of a continuity political in nature as much as spiritual. To expose it would invite confrontation with a lineage as old as Romulus and Remus, untouched by papal influence and therefore uncontainable. The power of the Ark did not rest in its physical form, it resided in what it could validate. And a truth in the wrong hands could set the world ablaze. Thus, on that fateful night, the Templars vowed to protect this knowledge. Not to veer into clandestine concealment for the sake of glory, but as an act of mercy. The scrolls, once unfurled from their linens, did not proclaim loudly, they whispered. The aged ink, now darkened, carried a rhythm that echoed less like proclamations and more like a legacy, a pulse harmonizing with the breath of those willing to unravel their stories. As they sifted through the names, they encountered some unfamiliar. Within church walls, yet instinctively recognized in their souls, they discerned marriages held in obscurity, births recorded not in grand chronicles, but nestled within the margins of sacred texts. Each leaf was not a declaration of doctrine, but a testimony to a genealogy that wove its existence through empires and sidestepped Roma's traditional liturgies. The Templars treated the documents with a care akin to guarding flames not from fear of destruction, but from awareness of what truths could ignite. Some scrolls already bore broken wax seals, others bore insignia no herald could decipher. Yet the narrative they unfolded remained unwavering, a lineage unbroken, quietly passing through conquests and exiles. A bloodline tracing back to none other than Solomon himself. The covenant had not vanished. It had gracefully retreated underground, encased in names that required no throne to be considered royal. To possess this knowledge was to grapple with a burden heavier than any sword of weight that no papal blessing could authorize. Thus, even in the remoteness of Rome, the prevailing sense was that something had changed in the ether, something that could not easily be excommunicated, for it did not seek permission to exist. The truth of the covenant they recognized could not be obliterated. It could only be forgotten, and now it was remembered. Among the scrolls lay a smaller collection, inscribed in finer script to hand, that appeared less rigid, weaving a narrative more personal. These documents contained counsel, not commands, but guidance, advising caution on how to protect the lineage. One note read, "Bury nothing whole. Let the river of descent flow in parts, and truth will find its way." Another scroll unveiled names of midwives, landowners, and even a knight whose identity had been meticulously erased from historical records, but preserved here in wax and ink. The specifics awed them. This was not legend. It was meticulous documentation, holy in its discipline, sacred in its restraint. Tucked within another page was a humble prayer plea, not for conquest but for mercy, that those cradling this bloodline would be shielded from the corrosive effects of pride and secrecy. The Templars gathered to deliberate their next steps. To congregate everything in one location would invite destruction. To scatter it risked loss. Their solution encompassed both methods. They created duplicate copies in concealed script and secured fragments in various locations, each entrusted to brothers who would never intersect. This covenant would not be betrayed through confession, for no single individual would ever hold enough knowledge to confess everything. The scrolls represented memories and exile papers that coursed with the essence of ancient promises. They could not be annihilated. They bore a life already woven into the stories of those the world had never seen coming. The Temple Mount was not merely a physical structure. It had been eternally enshrined through memory, as the Templars traced the seams of its foundation. They came to acknowledge that the stone itself possessed its own mathematical language. Not just balance and weight, but a proportion that mirrored scripture not in words, but in shapes. Arches echoed the meter of psalms and pillars mimicked genealogies. The architects of old had not simply built a temple. They had encoded a lineage into its very design. Each chamber beneath the surface, harbored ratios whispering names, spoken through the sacred art of celestial counting. Silence transformed into language as a hidden vault reflected a bloodline. Spiral staircase corresponded with the order of descent. Even the shadows cast by the flickering lamplight followed genealogical patterns, converging, diverging, and returning to a singular root. This was not mere architecture, but a liturgy carved in stone. The Templars began marking their findings not in ink, but with scratches that emulated ancient geometry. They were not simply charting territories, they were mastering a grammar more archaic than Latin, one that employed the intangible notions of space and silence to articulate what words could not. One brother found himself in tears after tracing the curvature of an arch, convinced he could feel the echo of a name among its elegant lines. What they discovered was not just evidence, it was affirmation. The arc, the scrolls, the silence, these were threads of a vast tapestry, misidentified as mere myth. The stones did not relay tales through sound, but with an unwavering certainty. And as the Templars delved into their meaning, they perceived a truth that no scripture had ever dared to voice aloud: that memory, when meticulously constructed, becomes impossible to obliterate. In a northern abbey, a fractured lintel unveiled engravings buried beneath newer edifices. A six-pointed star nestled harmoniously within an octagon, itself inscribed within a square. This symbol resonated with one found among the scrolls, connecting their discoveries in a way that sparked an insatiable curiosity. In other forgotten corridors, they stumbled upon chambers designed not for acoustics, but for secrecy, crafted to absorb sound, eliminate echoes, and conceal dialogue. One night, they uncovered a sequence of stones aligned not in a straightforward manner, but in accordance with a pattern of ancient numerical significance, once construed as mystical, now revealed as purposeful. These patterns extended beyond sacred geometry, encapsulated sacred memory. A technique for embedding bloodlines into architectural designs. Cathedrals across Europe would later be revealed to mirror these very blueprints in their stained glass artistry. The arrangement of naves and the deliberate positioning of steps. Each design breathed life into an ancestral memory, a nod to something deeply buried, yet never truly forgotten. The stones retained the pulse of histories that the world sought to silence, and they communicated an almost sacred breath imbued in their symmetry, a testimony found within their arcs and curves. The Templars came to hold a deep-seated belief that the temple had never genuinely crumbled, but had undergone a metamorphosis. Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to support our work and never miss an upload. Like this video, drop a comment, and share it with others to show your support and help us grow this historical community.